You're listening to a Look Back Machine shorty on the Wild Thornberrys. We'll get to the movie in a second, but first, here's how it came about. Writer Jeff Astroff.
My very first job, Duckman was my second job, and my first job was on a show called Hang with Mr. Cooper. We read the script to Duckman, and we absolutely loved it. You know, we all thought like it was going to be the next Simpsons because it was that good, and they were talking about Jason Alexander starring in it. It was just a fantastic script. Right. So we had 9 or 13 episodes. I think we had like 13 episodes the first season, and we were waiting for the back order, and they wanted to keep my partner and and me kind of interested. So and we needed to make money because like the 13 episodes were gone, and then there were other. We wanted to get another job, and they were like, no, hang on, don't leave us yet. We're gonna get picked up any day, and so they gave us. They had a couple of cells that they had drawn basically, and one was from a nursing home that we called Geezers. It was just like a animated show about nursing homes, and the other one wound up being the Wild Thornberrys, and we just created a show called Nigel Thornberry's Animal Kingdom or something like that. And by create it, we just came up with some characters and basically what the show would be about. But they really just tossed it to us just to keep us interested. I don't even know how much they gave us, how much money they gave us. They probably gave us like a couple of grand to last us, 3 months. We turned in these 2 treatments, and then nothing happened. And then later on, I don't even know if it was. I think it might have been after, because eventually, that money had run out, and we got an offer on Friends, and we sadly left Duckman to go on Friends, which probably in hindsight was the right move. And then maybe in a hiatus, might have been a hiatus or that summer between the first 2 seasons, they said I believe it was USA, or maybe it was Nickelodeon. Someone was interested in developing the Thornberrys, and they said they were going to basically keep some of the characters and the name, but the name Thornberry, and everything else they were going to start from scratch. But since we had originally come up with that, they gave us the right to write a pilot, and then they would pay us at the time like $1,500 an episode if we did that, or do nothing and just get a residual of $150 an episode. And at the time, for whatever reason, we were tired, or we didn't want to write a pilot, or my partner and I were not getting along, whatever the reason was. We decided, let's just, there's no way this thing is going to go 200 episodes, which it wound up going. So we let this guy, Steve Papoon, I guess, wrote it, and we watched 200 episodes, and several $100,000 slipped through our hands.
Writer Steve Papoon.
And I was working with a couple of partners, David Silverman and Steven Sostarczyk. Klasky Chupo approached 20th to develop a show based loosely on a Academy Award-winning short called Creature Comforts that was put together by Nick Parks, where he was like interviewing animals in a zoo and asking about their living conditions. They wanted to do something similar where there was a guy who could talk to animals going around the world interviewing them. And so 20th put them together with us, and we thought, well, we need more characters than just, Nigel, who talked to the animals, like a makeup person and a cameraman. So we created all the characters of the family, and then we wrote it as a pilot for Fox Television, which they passed on it. And so then Klasky Chupo asked 20th if they could have the project back, and they said sure. About a year later, they sold it to Nickelodeon with some changes to our version, but we ended up with a develop by credit. And actually, that's really all the involvement we had with it. We didn't write any of the episodes that were made or aired. Well, we just put together this family of characters and we came up with a story. And then Klasky Chupo, they went ahead and designed all the characters so Fox could get a better idea of what it was going to look like. And they commissioned us to write a script, so they liked it. But then the final script, I don't know, for whatever reason, they decided to pass. Yeah, in our version, it was the dad who talked to animals, not the little girl. Also, in our version, we had another character named Carson, who was the cameraman, who was kind of like a Dr. Smith character in Lost in Space, the fly in the ointment character, who was plotting to try to steal the show away from Nigel so he could be the star. and he was also to serve as kind of a love interest for the older daughter, Debbie. And our take on the monkey, Darwin, was a little different. We had a different name for him, and in our take, he had been the star of a TV show that was canceled, and when it was canceled, the trainer just left him in the jungle to die, and he managed to hook up with the Thornberrys and was hoping to get back to Hollywood and stage a comeback. And the little girl was different. They changed it so she talks to animals, which made sense for a Nickelodeon show. It was kind of funny how we found out it had been sold to Nickelodeon. It was, we thought the thing was dead. And about a year after we had written our script, Steve was driving down, I think it was La Brea Avenue, went by the Klasky Chupo building, and saw the characters painted on the side of the building. We thought, wait a minute, what are these characters from a failed project doing? So we did a little snooping and found out they'd sold it to Nickelodeon. And they thought that they had all the rights because they had come up with like the basic idea, but we got a lawyer involved to convince them that, well, no, I mean, they could have taken their original version back and sold it, but they took our version back and made some tweaks and sold it. So that was resolved very quickly and peacefully. We still get a little bit of money from the show, but not much. Right? It was like 4 stories tall, these characters. Like, oh my God.
And now to the movie. Here's director Jeff McGrath with the story.
At Klasky, I directed on Rugrats. They started to develop Duckman, and I directed on that. And then, by the way, at that point, I had brought up Kathy Malkasian, who's the other director on the features that we're talking about. And she's just an incredibly talented artist, and we got really friendly. And so she was my co-artist on a lot of the Duckman storyboards. Anyway, I directed on that, and then and Paul, the mayor, who was another director on Duckman, and I were friendly, and he liked my directing style, and they were starting Thornberrys, and he recommended me to head the show, and so that's what happened, and so forth. The Thornberrys at that point, Klasky had this relationship with Nickelodeon, and they really wanted material from Klasky. They wanted programs, they wanted shows. My feeling when I was working on it was that it wasn't like maybe or maybe not. It was like, wow, it's because they had written a pilot script like I think a couple of years before, and it was always kind of percolating along, but the moment was never propitious to move on it. But I don't know, it's just suddenly it kind of all came together, and they really wanted to do it, and the script was really cute. I think even at that point, Tim Curry was involved, and it just had a lot of energy, And then Kathy and I did the pilot. We each storyboarded half, and the pilot that we did was you don't do that anymore, but it was a pretty long. It was like a show length pilot. Well, not really. It was. I would say it was probably, I don't know, maybe 10 or 15 minutes. A pretty long pilot. They don't do that anymore. But yeah, it came back in color, and it really looked good. And so they went for it. I mean, before we did that, you might be interested. I remember going to a big roundtable meeting at Klasky because they wanted to figure out what Eliza, the main character, what she looked like, and because I guess different things had been proposed. The other characters, this guy Laszlo Nosek, who was an artist from Poland, I think, who was really gifted, and he had designed Nigel and Debbie and Marianne. He designed everybody, but Eliza was still up in the air because they couldn't figure out whether she would be attractive or what the deal was. Finally, we decided, well, let's make her kind of homely, really. I mean, so we put glasses on her and made her have buck teeth, kind of, and she had ponytails and And at that one meeting, I really remember that was when it was all nailed down. What she was like. And the other thing was that to decide on her voice took a while. I pushed. I remember really aggressively pushing for Lacey Chabert, who eventually got it to do it, because she just clearly had the best voice. It was just head and shoulders above anybody else. Plus, thankfully, we didn't use kids, which are the worst. You can't direct them. They're so shitty. And we went on to an end. I have to say that my idea for the show was, I'm really into making things filmic. I really wanted different shots, big wide shots and cuts, and I just wanted to, even though it was 2D, I wanted it to feel like a movie, and it did. I think it accomplished that, and plus the show was clever. I mean, we went to these different countries, and each show involved an animal, and I don't know, it had a lot going for it. Plus, I think the actors, the voice talent was really good. Tim Curry was great. Well, the show, was going along, and Klasky had this arrangement with Nickelodeon and Paramount because the first Rugrats film and Rugrats in Paris had both done well, especially the first one that did really well. It made $100 million over the first weekend, so which at that point, and at that time was really sensational. So it wasn't immediate that they were going to do a Thornberry movie, but it was talked about for months and months and months, and finally they greenlit it. I heard that it was on, so I basically lobbied for the job. I went out to lunch with this guy Hal Waite, who was the feature producer guy. I supervised the show. I'm familiar with it. I think I would be the best choice to work on the movie, and Gabor okayed it. This writer, Kate Boudelier, who wrote it, she had worked on the show as well. She was clearly the most gifted writer on the show, and she always came up with, I don't know, every script had something going on. You could just read it and tell that it was her work. So anyway, there were different script structures, stories that were pitched and nobody liked it. And it just went on and on for months and months and months. And I forget exactly how the whole thing with coaching came up. I mean, they were worried about it because they felt that it might not be that kid friendly, to talk about elephants being killed and stuff. But it just, I don't know, it seemed to work in a lot of different ways. And the other thing was that the other big idea was that Eliza loses her powers, and then she has to, she's more on her own, and that was sort of an interesting idea. We were working on it for months and months without it being officially greenlit. That's the way these things usually work. They greenlight things really reluctantly. But I was doing concept drawings and this and that, and when I still had my office in the regular Thornberry show, but I was really working on the feature. So yeah, that lasted for, I'd say, 3 or 4 months until it was finally officially greenlit, and then they moved us into this. At that point, Klasky Chupo owned this building on Sunset. I don't know whether you're familiar with it, but it was the Mercedes building, and it's now American Film College or something. Yeah, Kathy and I had offices on the 5th floor. I really need to talk about how dreadful the whole experience was. I haven't gotten to that part yet, but we will, I guess. The thing about working on the film proper, storyboards and working with artists and all that stuff, I have no problem with that at all. I'm good at all that stuff. But the horrible part was working with the executives, the two people, there was a person from Nickelodeon and a person from Paramount, plus the producer guy at Klasky, and they were all assholes, and it was really bad. And right at the beginning, I don't know, there was a bad meeting or something, and they cut Kathy and I out of the process of notes, if you can imagine. We were the directors, and we would have our notes. I mean, they would look at film or whatever, and then they were conveyed it to us secondhand. You know, it was a deliberate way to sort of diminish our stature. I think they didn't want to be bothered. That was really the way the whole thing developed. I mean, we would work and work and work, and then we would have these meetings to look at various versions of the movie. You know, it's I forget what the term they used was, but it's basically looking at animatics of the movie, you know, where the animation hasn't been done yet. But you have storyboards that are shot, and they put music to it, and the sound is already there, and so everybody could get a good idea of what's going on. The executives would give notes, and we had versions of the movie that we showed to audiences. You know, got to to test audiences. We had one. I mean, we had one in Boston. I went to Sacramento once. I forget. Anyway, 3 or 4 places, and the Sherry Lansing would come. She was the head of Paramount. She would give notes. At one point, I think it was in Boston, they decided that the film wasn't funny enough. So they brought in Norton to sort of supervise Kathy and me, which at that point the movie was too far along, you know. What they really wanted to do was put more gags in, which really meant poop jokes. So they had, you know, there were like 5 or 6 gags that they shoehorned into the show that were completely, you know, unrelated, I felt, and tonally wrong, but they insisted. I don't want to. The movie itself, the artistic part of the movie, I think is very successful, and what I really wanted to do with it, and I think it worked, was I wanted to make it big. That was the whole idea. Wanted to take a week, because Gabor had this idea that we would shoot it in 235, you know, in Panavision, this wider screen format, and it was just a joy to work in it. It was so great. It was so susceptible to interesting compositional challenges, and it was just, I would love to work in it again. That would be the thing about features that I would love to do again, is work in that aspect ratio, because it was really great. The notes were mandatory. I mean, we couldn't push back. That was it. It was very Teutonic or something. I mean, there was no give and take. And the other thing that was kind of a shock was that I came from television, you know. That's all I had done in animation. And television, the shows have to get done, you know. There's a production schedule. There's no sort of latitude for, well, you know, let's hold off and do another version of this or something. It has to go in the fucking air. That's it. So, you know, there's pressure to like get things done, and it's just efficient. You know, you get the work. I mean, you can do revisions and this and that, but all within a timeline. Features just operate differently. They have too much money. I felt way too much money involved, and there's too much time. They can just go back and demand, you know, to do whole sections, or, you know, reshoot things, or whatever they want. You know, there were no limits really in that sense. So it was hard to get closure, I would say, on things, because every executive had to have, you know, their notes taken, and Sherry Lansing's notes were kind of big picture, and they were okay. but a lot of the other notes are stupid, and we would just have to work around them. A lot, you know, there was a lot of micromanagement shit. And then that's not even getting into the mixes, which, you know, that also involves a lot of note changes and this and that. The music is all a whole different ball of wax. But yeah, there were a lot of opportunities for mischief, I would say, in the whole process. To the extent that it was so demoralizing that Kathy just quit animation. She left. She went up to Fresno. She does graphic novels now. She has for a number of years, and they're really great. And she just got so sick of the whole thing that was that. We were finally able to get Paul Simon to come and do this song. And yeah, he came. I met him, and he found a spot for this song. He hadn't composed it yet, but he found a spot for this song. And I remember that he wanted it long enough. We had to cut out 2 gags that were really working, and it was, oh yeah, that was hard. But he came back with this song, and it's funny. The song is probably the thing that most people know about the movie now. The song is one of his really better songs. It's a great song. My daughter, who sings, she's a teacher, but she also has a music career, and she sung at many weddings, and that song is the one they sing at those weddings. You know, he really delivered the goods. It eventually made, I think, $40 million, which they were disappointed with that, just because it was up against The Lord of the Rings the same weekend. And it was really too bad because the reviews were uniformly really good. Great, I would say. I mean, I got a portfolio of all these reviews from all over the country, and they were all really good. You know, everybody really liked the movie. And I mean, it wasn't Rotten Tomatoes at that point, but whatever the equivalent was. I mean, it was just, I think it got even 2 thumbs up from Ebert and those guys. At the end of the day, we did direct, and the movie that's there is the movie that I wanted to make, apart from the poop jokes and all that stuff. But I'm proud of that movie. And I mean, a lot of it now is dated because of different, I mean, you know, going around in a vehicle and taking planes with, but there's still some really good stuff in it. And I don't know, apart from the horrible production, demeaning stuff that we went through, I look back on it and satisfied with the product itself. It was the best movie that Klasky ever made.